Hey, how's everyone doing today? I'm Vignesh Jachandar, and I'm representing Group 5. Our topic for today is cross-cultural management, a case study. I'm going to hand it over to my boy Vikas, who's going to be talking about the impact of social media in global business. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Vikas. Over the last decade, social media usage has increased tremendously for commercial networking purposes. There are 3.6 billion active social media users worldwide, and this number is expected to be 4.4 billion by 2025. Social media hugely impacts on how people run their businesses these days. Social media is a platform that transforms the world into a global village that can be easily communicated and to share information across the globe within seconds. Global managers now realize that these social media platforms are a potential source of information outside normal chain of communication. Business chains such as Burger King, Target, Dell are trying to find out what works for them as Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter have changed their way of customer interaction. Communication is a process of exchanging information through media such as behavior, words, and material artifacts. There are stages during which the meaning can be distorted. Any deviation from the transmitted information is noise. When sender and receiver each exist in their unique private world based on experience, culture, relations, and values, noise occurs. Effective communication is a complex process of sender building a perpetual bridge and shares information through a medium. After that, receiver interprets the message and draws a conclusion, in most cases encoded, and sends back a response, making communication a circular process. Effective communication relies upon how similar other person's cultural expectations are to our own. John Child suggests these guidelines to establish a cultivating trust. Create a clear and calculated basis for natural benefit and honor them. Improve predictability through open communication and strive to resolve conflicts. Socialize regularly and develop mutual bonding. We need to be aware of cultural variables which impacts the communication process. Our attitude underlie the way we act and behave. In cross-cultural communications, ethnocentric attitudes act as a source of noise which causes common stereotyping. Social organization influences our perceptions in values, approach, and priorities. Every individual has their own thought pattern of logical progression. In India, hierarchy plays an important role. Decision making is solely the responsibility of the top line management. Therefore, communicating cross-cultural might be a difficult task if not done in the right way. One example of language variable is a billboard ad of Zomato, a food delivery company in India, with the abbreviations MC and BC. Although their version were butter chicken and mac and cheese, people incited them in the wrong way of some expletives in Hindi. There are 28 states in India, and each state has their own official language. The central government of India named Hindi as the national language of India. The population is estimated to be 1.3 billion as of 2015. And the climate varies from tropical monsoon in south to temperate in north. Indians are so cautious of their status and social order. All relationships involve hierarchy, be it gurus in school or patriarch, the head of the family, or the boss in a company, has the ultimate responsibility. People define themselves by the groups to which they belong to. Indians have a hard time saying no, both verbally and non-verbally. Rather than disappointing you, they would give a response they think you might want to hear, and this shouldn't be considered rude or dishonest. Decision making in India is a slow process because only the top line management can make them. Any successful negotiation should be celebrated by a meal. And when it comes to dressing etiquette for a meeting, the dressing should be conservative. As I said in the introduction, the climate varies from tropical monsoon in south to temperate in north. Dress code varies from outer parts to be less formal and colder to be more formal. Titles are usually determined by age, university degree, and profession. Usually, business cards are exchanged after initial handshake and greeting. As you can see in the picture, Namaste Folding hands in front of chest is a common way of greeting people with dignity and respect. Human brain is most likely to remember or notice what they see over what they hear. Hence the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Based on study, these subtle messages account for between 65 and 93% of interpreted communication. A slight deviation in body language, speech pattern often cause trust issues and misconception in cross-cultural communication. There are three types of media for non-verbal communication. Kinesthetic behavior, which is communicating through body movements. Proxemics, proximity and space, which both parties decide to give themselves. Paralanguage is how something is said rather than the context, which modifies the meaning of what has been said. Indian greetings are influenced by religion, education, and social class. There is a hierarchical culture of greeting the elder or senior first. Shaking hands is a common greeting gesture, but there are seldom handshakes between cross genders. Indian names vary based on culture, social class, religion, and the region they belong to. Gift giving is a common practice in India, but there are few limitations to it. For example, Muslims cannot be given gifts made of pigskin or alcohol products, or gifts not to be opened when given. There are some dining etiquettes to be followed, like dressing modestly and conservatively, taking off your shoes before entering a house. Also, there are various dietary restrictions, such as Hindus not eating beef, and most of them are vegetarians. Muslims don't eat pork or have alcohol, and Sikhs don't eat beef.
To understand the way of communication of Arabs, first we have to know that who are Arabs. Arabs are the one who are found in the Middle Eastern world and bound by the whole Islamic community. Here we can also see that not all the Middle Eastern countries are Arabs, but as most of them are from Muslim community, so it is considered as Arabic world. The word Arab is also interchangeable with Muslim world. There are three categories to consider regarding cultural values in Arab community, which are collectivism, hospitality, and honor. The values of collectivism are part of child rearing in Arab community, as from childhood the children are more close and intimate with their elders, so naturally in the adulthood they keep their parents and elders above anything. The hospitality is also important part of Arabs, as they always welcome and share with everyone. On all the big occasions, Arabs are known for sharing, distributing food to those who are in need, such as marriages, burial, and other big programs. The last but not the least part of Arab values is honor, also known as ird for women. In Arabic community, there is a certain kind of code of conduct for both men and women, but mostly for women, as they are the one who are going to protect the honor of their father, brothers, brothers of their fathers, husband and husband's family. In this case study, I will cover two aspects of the Arabic communication style, which are verbal communication and non-verbal communication. By the end of this presentation, we will have a better understanding on how the Arabic communication style differs from mainstream communication style. Most of the standard practices are upheld as a way to conserve their culture. In the Arabs, the communication between same gender is quite different from the opposite genders, as the males cannot touch or stare at any woman in the public even if they are married. The very first part of the communication is verbal communication. Saudi Arabians generally have an indirect communication style. It is common for people to understate their opinion in an attempt to save face and remain polite. Regarding the conversation style, Saudis generally strive to maintain group harmony by avoiding individual attention or singling out a selected person. People's communication pattern can also differ according to the hierarchy, as if the opposite person is from bigger post or is older in age, then the communication depends on the context. Any kind of personal criticism or advice should always be approached sensitively and privately. Criticism in Arabic society can always be mistaken for mild personal offense. Arabs often speak loudly with a rising tone, whether they are laughing or just saying simple things. It's just natural to them. The emotional effectiveness is also part of verbal communication in Arabic society, as sometimes the Arabs do not thrive on only ideas. It is the emotional tone behind their speeches is the one that persuade people to do their job. Now we are going to discuss the non-verbal ways of Arabic communication. People are usually comfortable hugging and touching friends of the same gender, while on the other hand, touching opposite gender in public can be quite offensive. So these standards of personal space are different from Western culture as they depend on context. There is no such thing as 5 feet distance in Arabic culture if the person is a friend from the same gender. The distance is often smaller than what Westerns are used to in public. When talking to people of the same age, gender, or status, direct eye contact is expected as it shows that the person is interested in the talk. And on the other hand, if a person is lowering their gaze from another person, it can be because of their religion and age of the other person, as it is known as politeness in Arabic culture. Time is also an important part of the Arabic culture, where it is said that the time will set everything right. By saying the term inshallah, which means God's willing, means that everything is God's control and nobody can do anything before the right time. The word inshallah can also be used in many different ways. Sometimes it means yes, and in some condition it means no. Hello, my name is Navdeep Kaur and I'll be covering the next two case studies of our presentation. The very first case study is impact of Feng Shui on business. The first concept is the universe flow of energy, which the Chinese call Qi. The meaning of the words Feng Shui from Chinese is wind and water. It is said that through wind and water, the Qi is able to flow through nature and the entire universe. It is also believed that it is very important to balance out the Qi so everything that is negative can be offset. The other concept is based on the opposition of yin and yang, which is well-known symbol of opposing but complementary forces that allow the universe to exist in harmony. While yin is the black side and yang is the white side, it is said that there will always be a little yin and yang and vice versa. There are 5 elements of Feng Shui. The first one is wood, that controls the power of imagination and expansion, while it represents traits such as growth, birth, strength, flexibility, and intuition. The very next element, fire, increases enthusiasm and leadership skills by maximizing the fire element. It can be used in design to encourage expressiveness, inspiration, and boldness. The element earth influences physical strength and order while generating an overall feeling of grounding, balance, and stability. The water's domain bounds spirituality and emotions. The stability of water brings about inspiration, wisdom, and insightfulness. The last element, metal, affects mental clarity and logic. The very presence of metal within an area are often felt in personal characteristics like organization, focus, righteousness, and analytical abilities. There are some common practices surrounding Feng Shui, which include that Feng Shui could improve business by adjusting decoration and layout, using space to attract positive energy in and around oneself. The entrance of an office should not have anything blocking on its way. It should be easily accessible. And also, it is said that One should always sit with a solid wall behind their back, as there shouldn't be any window behind your back. Also, keeping food dogs outside can keep off evil influential people. Using feng shui, always clean up your desk and obtain discard all the papers that you simply don't need. Immediately collect them in a files, confined cabinets and drawers that are far away from your eyesight. Also, bring in the plants with nice rounded leaves to counter the metal influences within the offices. Now we will talking about how feng shui can have an impact on the business. When a business is in a position to acknowledge the positive energy and therefore the impact on its operations also turns positive, it can change negative influences and increase positive effects. The effect of excellent feng shui principle can increase the potential of a social as well as financial success of a firm. It creates a more harmonious work environment that both increases and supports a business and the people you work with. Feng Shui is widely utilized in many industries to draw in attention. This is because rich people are more sensitive to superstitious beliefs to avoid bad luck and make them feel comfortable in keeping their money safe. A person can use Feng Shui which is profitable for both the parties.
Hey, how's it going? This is my name is Jack Chandler, and I'm going to be speaking about communicating Italian style. So Italian gestures. So Italians use the most body language while communicating, and this is not just gestures that they make by hand. It could be about fidgeting with their hands or doing other stuff like that. And gestures can also be culture specific. Italy has over 20 regions or 20 provinces, and it's a country bigger than we give it credit for. And each of its own individual cities have their own gestures, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Also, Italians tend to be gregarious, loud, and also interrupt one another during conversation. This is completely normal in Italian culture, but if an Italian had to come to Canada and would interrupt a Canadian while having a conversation, that could come off as them cutting off, and that could piss off a lot of Canadians. So that's something to keep in mind for the Italians if they do visit any other Western countries. So although it might seem rude to people outside of Italy, it's completely normal, and that's how they communicate. So if a Canadian person goes to Italy, there's a good chance that if he sticks to his Canadian culture and does not go into interrupting people, he or she might be left behind. But all the other Italians are cutting each other off and doing their thing. Canadians would just be looking there like, what's going on? So it could be a little bit challenging for a Canadian to get his point across in Italy without seeming to be rude. Let's talk about the traits of an Italian person. Did you know that Italians make about 250 gestures while talking, whether it be face to face or on the phone? That's a lot of energy, in my opinion. So also, they have really high taste for style and fashion, like Milan Fashion Week. Milan is in Italy, and they're also home to brands like Gucci and Dior. Wait, Dior's French. Oh, never mind. They also have really good cars like Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Pagani. They're also emotionally driven. They're very easygoing, and eye contact is essential while shaking hands and while holding conversation. And that's eye contact is something that's respectful in most cultures, but not in the Middle East. And when you think about it, it's kind of funny that you get in trouble for making eye contact in the Middle East, but then also when you move to Italy, it's considered respectful. So it's just culture. Now we're going to move to miscommunication with the Brazilian auto parts manufacturer. So just an introduction. Mr. Silva is the president of a mid-sized auto parts manufacturer in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He was looking forward to a new business relationship with Mr. Williams, the president of Lucky Auto Parts Company based in Ames, Iowa, and that's in the United States. So the first issue was that the person that had been appointed to represent Lucky Auto Parts, the company that Mr. Williams runs, and the USA, was not very fluent with the Latin American culture. He was still an amateur, and he did not think about there being a cultural difference, or much of a cultural difference between the United States and Brazil. So, Valley is the name of the representative, had a very casual attitude about making a first impression, because in his mind, he did not think of the Brazilians to be any different from the Americans. So this was the first mistake that he made, that he did not take it very seriously upon himself to realize that there are differences that exist between his culture and the Brazilian culture. So the first problem arises when Wally, upon meeting up with his potential business partner, dives straight into business, making him look very focused on his own personal priorities rather than cultivating a relationship with Mrs. Silva. This was a problem because it made him look like he only cared about his priorities rather than building a relationship or even trying to build a relationship with the Brazilian auto parts manufacturer. And this can be a problem because in the Brazilian culture, you first prioritize meeting people and you put people over business other than putting business over people. Alright, so that begs the question, why did this attitude of really make communication with Silva so difficult? And also, what's next? Due to really sabotaging his negotiation with the Brazilian auto parts manufacturer, his father-in-law, Mr. Williams, personally visits Rio hoping to patch things up and fix everything that Willie has made so that he can get the deal with the Brazilian auto manufacturer. And this negligence of really thinking that they had such similar cultures cost his father-in-law an entire trip from the USA to the Brazil, and that's really expensive and time-consuming. Now I'd like to take a minute to examine the missteps or the mistakes made by Willie and his father-in-law. Okay, so let's examine the 3 mistakes that was made by Lucky Auto Parts. So Mr. Williams sent his less experienced associate to Rio instead of being there himself to carry out the negotiation. This makes him look like he doesn't care enough about the business deal that he had to send somebody else to do it. It almost makes him look like he feels like he's too important in the eyes of Mr. Silva, and that's pretty unprofessional, if you ask me. And Billy, completely oblivious to the Brazilian way of handling business, dived right upon business when arrival. This made him look very self-absorbed, and this made him look like all he cared about was himself and for him to get the business deal. And it made Mr. Silva feel like he did not matter as a human outside of the business, which can be really rude when it comes to certain cultures. And this was one of the major mistakes that was made by Willie. And Willie also being negligent to learn and embrace the Brazilian culture before arrival, or aka really doing his homework, instead of just going to Brazil and expecting everything to be just like in the United States. This entire ordeal could have been completely prevented. But this was not the case, though. It looks like it was an honest mistake from Willie's side that he did not know much about the Brazilian culture, but at the same time, he is to be blamed that there's a certain amount of work that needs to be done to kind of acquaint yourself with the new culture, and this can come off as being ignorant in Mr. Silva's eyes, which is not good for a business deal. Yeah, so Brazilians advise Americans. So what would you, as a Brazilian, tell Americans? So Americans tend to have this mentality of just being better than everyone else, like USA #1. And it often leads to neglect in considering customs and just knowing that there's a whole entire world that exists just outside of the USA. And this can often, kind of end up in the neglect and learning how different the other cultures are. So probably the greatest advice that I could personally give to an American just is to be mindful and just really pay attention to how the locals treat each other. And once you cultivate their practices, once you put in use of what they're doing, locals from one to another, and once you establish the differences, you like knowingly or unknowingly not be an outsider anymore. So now what if the roles were switched? Now picture a Brazilian native going to America in search of a potential supplier. So they'd probably be appalled by the lack of personal interaction, how everyone is just down to earth and wants to get straight into the business. And an outsider would absolutely not call America the most hospitable country. And they'll also be surprised with the lack of interaction, or just as much as interaction they would have had they stayed in Brazil. And the American mentality of establishing divide between work and personal life can quickly be identified. So Americans tend to, have their personal life on the weekends or after work, and when they're working, it's just work, work, work. And this also kind of makes them look like they're playing a role or not being a true self when working. And this is so different from the Brazilian culture, where there's not such a divide between work and personal life. In a way, work is personal life, if that makes sense. And also, in long term, could have a very negative effect in finding a supplier in the United States, because the Brazilians would have to do way more, who seek to cultivate a more personal relationship with the supplier. They have to put in way more effort than the Americans. So this can be very challenging for a Brazilian point of view. But also, if the Brazilian just wants business and is okay with not forming any interactions, and is okay with just having money and not personal whatever, then maybe it's a good choice for Brazilians. You never know. Okay, so conclusion to all of this. So I still remember my sociology professor once told me that culture only consists of two things: what we have and what we think about what we have. So it's as simple as that. It might be an oversimplification, but that's the fundamental of what constitutes culture. And the sooner the prejudices and stereotypes are deterred, the more fruitful the communication and work will be in our so-called modern village. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Bye.